little sanding pad that I've picked up at one of the art supply stores. One side's a little coarser and the other side's a finer grain. So I just want to knock off the rough edges of the grain. And if there's any little nubs along the outer edges of the heart, I like to sand them off so that you just break down that real sharp edge from the saw blade, and it's a little bit smoother to the touch. So we're just doing a real quick sanding. Once you've done that, we're going to then put a layer of wood sealer or multi-purpose sealer on the heart. The multi-purpose sealer I'm using today is the Traditions multi-purpose sealer. It comes in 3-ounce or 8-ounce bottles, and it dries clear. So we're just going to pour out a little bit on the palette here, and I'm using the 3/4 inch flat brush, and you're just going to do a quick cover over the whole heart. This paint brush has a little bit of black paint in it from something I was previously base coating, but that's okay because we're going to paint this heart black anyway. But I usually try to brush on in the direction of the grain, and the grain on this heart's running horizontally, so that's why I'm brushing back and forth. So that is all covered. And don't forget to hit a little bit on your edges, because the plywood has a little bit more of an open grain on the edges, so it's good to get those sealed so that they don't later cause the glue to come unseparated if they get exposed to any moisture. What the sealer does is kind of puts a coating. It sinks into the grain of your wood, but puts a little bit of a coating on it so that when it dries and you go to the next step, which is base coating with your color, your paint doesn't sink into the wood quite so much, and you can actually, it doesn't take as much paint to base coat. You know, as you're painting the edges, if you get a little ridge of paint on the front, just go back and brush that off. Okay, so we're going to stop for a second and let our sealer dry, and then we'll be coming back to base coat with black. Okay, we're back. Our sealer's dried. I'm usually impatient, so I used a hairdryer to help speed that along. But usually you can tell when your paint or sealer's dried. If you touch the surface, it's not cold any longer. It should be room temperature. Now you'll notice as you feel over your wooden surface after you've put the sealer on, the moisture in that's raised the grain of the wood up a little bit. So again, we're going to use our sander and just lightly sand over that to smooth that grain back down. Okay, so it feels smooth again. We're ready to put our base coat on here. So I'm just, again, using the wax palette. We're going to put out a puddle of black paint, and we're going to go back to the 3/4 inch flat brush that we did the sealer with. And you're going to load paint into that brush, and again, I'm following the grain of the wood. And I'm going to just cover this heart with black paint. With the 3/4 inch brush, this goes pretty quickly, and if you're using the Traditions paint, you'll see that one coat should give you pretty good coverage. I don't think you'll need a second one. Now, if you're using another brand of paint, say DecoArt Americana or maybe the Ceram coat or Folk Art, you may need a couple coats of this black to get a good coverage. But with the Traditions, one coat is enough. It's got so much pigment in it, you get really good coverage. You can see as I go, I just stroke back over the areas I've done to blend any ridges out. You want to have that base coat look as smooth as possible. And I'm just lightly brushing across to smooth it out. And don't forget to do your edges. I'm just laying the flat brush just flat against that edge and pulling a little. You don't want to have too much paint on your brush, otherwise it might leave a ridge of paint on the front of your heart. But check that, and if it happens, just brush over that a little bit to smooth it back down. Okay, so now we've got our heart based with black, and we're going to stop for a little bit and let that dry. And you can speed up that drying process with a hairdryer if you want to, if you're impatient like I am, which as soon as I turn the video off, I'll probably run over to the hairdryer. And I'm going to again take the fine grain side of the sanding pad and sand that part back down again, following the grain of the wood. Wipe that over with my hand to remove any dust. If you have a nice smooth surface as you're starting, your actual painting's going to go on much more nicely than if your wood is too rough and grainy. Now we're ready to transfer our design onto the heart. What you'll do is you'll print out your design on paper, and you'll need to cut the design if you want, so that you can piece it together. Because the heart's too big to fit on one 8.5 by 11 sheet, it had to be broken up into 2 pieces. Then you're going to take a sheet of tracing paper and we'll sheet off here. And you're going to lay that tracing paper over the printed drawing. And take your fine marker and start tracing around the outlines of the design. You want to be careful and follow the lines as closely as you can. If you get off track too much, then when you transfer the design to your wooden surface, it may be out of kilter a little bit, and your final painting might not look aligned. So try to stay as closely on the lines as possible. But you can see I'm just going over all the outlining. And you're just going to continue that for the whole pattern. So when you remove it, you'll see that you've got the outlines traced onto your tracing paper. Now I took the easy way out and I printed my design onto the tracing paper on my my printer. So all I have to do is cut it, tape the two pieces together so I have a complete heart, and then lay it on my heart to position it. And you may want to take a piece of Scotch tape or something to hold it in place so it doesn't slip. But I usually don't do that. I'll just hold it in place. And you're going to slip a piece of graphite paper. And we're going to use the white graphite. So you're going to hold your design in place. And let me move this palette with the wet paint out of here. And you're going to slide that between your wood surface and the tracing. So let's just hold it over here and slide it under. Now when you do this, you want to be sure that you have the right side of the transfer graphite paper down. On the white paper, one side's got kind of a paper bag almost color to it, and the other side is more white. So the side more white has got the coating that's going to transfer to your surface. So you want that side against surface, and the more paper color side towards facing up. So you're going to lay that over your heart and position it, and then you're going to take a stylus, and I like to use a stylus that has a small fine into it so that your graphite lines are fine. If they get too thick, it gets difficult to cover them with paint. So you're going to, again, just transfer the lines of your drawing. And at this point, you're just going to transfer the main outlines. You don't want to transfer any of the detail that's going to be covered up when you do your base coats. So we're just tracing the outside line of the hat. And after you do a section, hold it in place and lift up and look to make sure your design's transferring. If there's been many times that, especially when you're using the gray graphite paper, that you start transferring the design and you'll get completely done and lift up your design and find that you've had your graphite paper upside down. So your tracing's on the back of your drawing rather than on your surface. So do a little bit and check and just make sure you're heading in the right direction. So we're going to trace the outside edge of the snowman's body. You'll notice we're not going to do the stars, we're not going to do the ball on the end of the hat, and we're not going to do the facial features right now. We're going to do the arms and the mittens. And you can do the bird, but don't do the bird's legs. And again, just check every once in a while to make sure you've covered all the lines. Sometimes it's easy to forget what things you've gone over and which you haven't. We're going to do the other arm now, and the mitten. And I'm not going to transfer the wintertime lettering because we're going to do that with the stencil. If you don't have the stencil, you can transfer the letters and paint them in with a small flat brush, but I'm going to use the stencil. It's a lot faster than trying to base coat each of those letters. I'm going to just do the tree trunk. And I'm not going to do the star right now because we're going to have to do the star after we put the letters on, and the top of that tree after we put the letters on. But you can, the rest of the tree, you can put in a couple of the branches just so you can see what direction your strokes are going to go. You don't have to do every one. So at this point, you'll see that we have the outlines of the snowman, the bird, and a little bit of the tree transferred. So we can set our tracing aside for the moment and get ready to paint.